Hi, this is Mike Billington. I'm with the Executive Intelligence Review and the International Schiller Institute. I'm going to speak today on a theme I borrowed from Helga Zepp-LaRouche, the founder and head of the International Schiller Institute, towards a new architecture for peace and development for all nations. I've been a member of the LaRouche movement for 53 years. I've been involved in both political organizing and political intelligence and history research. I'm currently functioning as the Director of Asian Intelligence for the Executive Intelligence Review, the EIR, and also as co-editor of EIR. I joined the organization during the peak of the Vietnam War, a criminal war which was to a great extent the beginning of the decay and decline of the American Republic. This was soon after President Nixon in 1971 took the dollar off of the gold standard and allowed the so-called floating exchange rate, which was basically a policy of looting, granting the right to the dollar-centered financial institutions to loot at will from the majority of the world's nations. LaRouche forecast at the time of Nixon, the 1971 policy, he forecast that this would lead to economic disintegration, to depressions, but also to wars, and eventually to a global war, which has, as is pretty obvious today, unfortunately been borne out, as evidenced by the current extreme danger of global nuclear war provoked by the NATO war on Russia via the Ukraine crisis, the Israeli genocide against the Palestinian people, backed by the US and the UK, of course, and on the war on China, which is now under construction by so-called global NATO. This crisis is also evidence of the destruction not only of international peace, but also of international law. The so-called neoconservative control of the United States policy in league with the United Kingdom is essentially a continuation of the British Empire, but armed with nuclear weapons. The so-called rule of law of this empire is, as we all know now, is the law of the jungle, with the control of much of the world's economy by the US dollar facilitating the use of illegal sanctions, and ultimately as justification for carrying out regime change wars against any country who puts up any resistance to this unipolar world. And now an open preparation for war on China, and open preparation for the use of nuclear weapons, which would almost certainly lead to the end of civilization itself. An alternative does exist. In the model of Western history, we have the Peace of Westphalia of 1648, which ended 100 years of religious warfare in Europe. The peace was the result of a recognition that if the war was not to end, there'd be no one left to enjoy the so-called victory. Which is a fact which, of course, is abundantly true today in the nuclear era. So they agreed at that time in 1648, after a long series of meetings of all sides involved in those religious wars, that they had to, if they were going to end this, they had to put aside their grievances. They had to effectively agree that they were going to stop blaming each other for the crisis, and that the interests of each nation in the new geometry which they were building, the interests of each nation had to include the interests of the others. And this was the basis upon which the sovereign nation state idea developed, with ups and downs, as we all know, but nonetheless, this was the basis of that. And this concept is clearly included today in the win-win agreement between nations, which is the bedrock of the Belt and Road Initiative of the Chinese, and is increasingly the case with the emerging principles of the BRICS nations. We in the Schiller Institute and the EIR do not accept the idea that the Western nations are so degenerate that such a noble conception cannot be implemented or accepted. The situation is very dire. The dollar system is in decay, with $2 quadrillion in derivative debts, gambling debts, sitting on top of the degenerating economy, physical economy. And this is fueled by the false belief that printing money to wage wars and to bail out banks can go on without limit. Those limits have been reached. The vast majority of the world, the global South, the global majority, have publicly and openly rejected the colonial policies of Wall Street and the City of London. And they are turning to the BRICS as a new paradigm. If the US and the UK and Europe are to survive, they must take this new path. They must cooperate with Russia and China, not wage war on them, and the BRICS, on a new Peace of Westphalia model for a new architecture. The Schiller Institute and the International Peace Coalition, which has now been meeting weekly on Fridays for 68 weeks, and now brings together over 1,000 people from over 50 countries around the world, is dedicated to achieving that new paradigm for mankind, to have those who believe in peace to put aside whatever political differences they may have and to join forces to stop this rush to nuclear war. And I call on all of you to join with us in this international movement. So I thank you.